Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This vintage review covers the BRE Datsun, and that's now known as Nissan to all you young ones. And it's the 240Z model from the BRE Racing series that was started by Pete Brock back in 1965. Now this is a 125 scale kit number 85-1422, and it was first issued in 1972, but this was redone and put back out there in 2015. Now you can still find these kits at online auctions. Now Brock was a successful racer, and he worked on the GT circuit with the likes of Datsun and Hino and some of the other makers, and this car had pretty much straight factory parts. It had some modified struts and shocks, springs, etc., but it was pretty much stock back in the day when the cars actually were the cars that you could see. Now it consists of 105 parts molded in white, clear, and chrome, and it has vinyl tires and some tubing for the nicely detailed 6-cylinder motor. The chassis and suspension is pretty well done, and you'll have to do some masking because it's a two-tone paint scheme, and it's a level 3 build due to some pretty large decals. Although they're nice, they still take some attention and some setting solution. When you're done, the overall dimensions are 6 5/8 inches long, 2 5/8 inches wide, and about 2 inches high. Here are the kit's contents, and it's nicely bagged. The decals are separate along with the instructions, and it comes in pretty good molding because the kit was pretty well cared for. Now we're going to find once again that the decals can be a little difficult to apply, and I suggest you use some of the setting solutions. Also remember that we're going to have to heed this manufacturer's safety and use guidelines for any of the products that you see or hear mentioned in the review. And we'll be using mostly liquid cement, sometimes super glue for strength, and white or crystal clear for the windows. Okay, the parts for the motor, and it does include a lot of chrome, and we're going to dechrome some of the pieces. The belts, pulleys, the front engine plate, the carbs, and just we're going to paint those separately. And you can dechrome parts simply by putting them in some household bleach or some of the purple power degreasers, etc. Even easy off, if it's used judiciously and sparingly, it'll work just fine. You just have to rinse the parts off when you're done. And here's the completed engine. This is the right side, and as the motor comes with additional oil lines, I decided to plumb it with some spark plug wires too. That's just a distributor and some wiring that I made, and I got the firing order off the internet and put them into the proper place. Now when I was done with most of the construction here, I gave the engine block a coating with some gunmetal, and the transmission and the dechromed parts and the headers, and the belts, they're painted flat black. And once that was done, I let it dry and gave it what we call a black wash. So that's a mix of 50-50 paint and thinner to bring out some of the highlights and to even actually tone down some of the chromed parts that were still left. Now on the headers, I used a little clear and blue paint to give them a kind of a purplish burnt color, and some clear blue to give them a little tinge of high heat. And then the motor was set aside to dry. Just as a reminder, you'll have to remove any plating or paint from any of the parts you want to glue together for good adhesion if you haven't found out already. Now we're going to take the suspension pieces, there's 11 of these parts, and clean those up, make sure you remove any flash or ejector pin marks, etc. And the brake discs and the connecting rods are painted steel, and I mixed some black and some aluminum for that. The shock boots and the tie rod boots are black, and the cross members and the shock tubes are gloss white. The sway bar was gunmetal, and then these were set aside to dry. So get out the parts for the rear suspension, and then there's 8 of those pieces, and clean those up as well. And then paint the brake disc steel color, and then the CV axles are gloss white and the boots are black. Now the gearbox and suspension arms are black, as well as the rear suspension mount, which is flat black. Now set those aside to dry. With the suspension painted parts dried, you can go ahead and assemble. Remember to remove, scrape any paint off where you're going to glue. And you can follow the instructions, but it's pretty straightforward. And as you can see here pretty plainly, the parts go together pretty well, even though it's a pretty sophisticated suspension for a model kit. So take your time, do a lot of test fitting, and put those together now. Now we'll work on the chassis, and we're going to paint that and the transmission mount and the engine compartment gloss white. And I used Krylon paint for that because it dries in about an hour. And then I painted the fuel tank and spare tire well. You don't see those here on the other side, and those are flat black. And I also painted the drive shaft that you can see here a gunmetal, and the shocks are white and the boots are flat black. After all the parts are thoroughly dried, we can start the main lower chassis assembly in the motor installation. So the first sub-assembly to install is the front suspension, and be careful with the shocks as they're small and just a little pressure can break them. I had one break off at the boot, but was able to square that off and glue it back. So be careful with those. And after the shock repair dried, the motor was installed into place on the motor mounts, and it's a nice positive fit. Make sure that it goes onto the mounts in front, and of course the brace in the back there. And the one on the mount on the oil pan that glues to the center of the front cross member, so you have to notch that into position. And once you glue the mount to the cross member, you should glue the transmission mount in place and let it dry thoroughly. Now we'll gather these parts for the next sub-assemblies, and we're going to work on the radiator support and radiator and the oil cooler and the battery. And you paint the radiator support and the firewall gloss white, and at the same time you can spray the chassis there gloss white so that they're good and dry for assembly steps later. Now the front side of the radiator is molded onto the support frame, so I painted it flat black. And also the battery and the oil filter unit had been painted semi-gloss black. Now the main core of the radiator is separate, and that was painted flat black, and then once and allowed to dry, then I painted the oil cooler steel. And when they were all dry, the 3 parts were glued together. And note that on the line drawings on the instructions show how to mount that oil cooler, but when I test fit it, there was a clearance problem with the fender wall and the lower oil cooler line, so I reversed the mounting to where the lines are attached nearer the radiator. So let's work with the firewall and the engine compartment. So get the brake master cylinder and the oil reservoir, and then the interior gets sprayed a camouflage gray, which is kind of a light whitish gray. And once I had dried the gas pedal and the brake and clutch pedals from you see they're painted here with some flat black detailing, they were glued into place and set aside to dry as well. So let's grab the seats and clean those up on the edges, and we'll move on here to the interior parts. I sprayed them with some satin black color, and the white seat though is a second factory seat that was replaced by the racing seat, and I can't verify the factory seat was left in on the passenger side, so I installed it according to the instructions, but I just couldn't find information on that. It seems odd, but the other photo is the rest of the interior parts, and that consists of the door panels, the dash, steering column and wheel, and the roll bar and support. And again, these were sprayed satin black, and all were allowed to dry. So go ahead and grab the exhaust pipes, and I painted those gray metallic. They're kind of a steel color, and then I set that aside to dry. And at this point, I glue in the drive shaft and the rear suspension simultaneously, and the fuel tank spare tire tub in the back. Now paint the spare tire tub flat black as mentioned earlier, and put that into place at this time too. So we started working on the chassis pan there, and I noticed on the interior section there's a copyright script, so I removed that with a knife and some sandpaper. Then I masked the engine compartment off and sprayed the chassis pan a camouflage gray and set it aside. So get the gauge decals out. They're, as you can see here, pretty colorful, and I used some of the setting solution to put those into place in the dashboard. And as you can see, the dashboard is a semi-gloss black. It's got a blue hue around it from the surrounding paper, but it's a nice color black, and it's pretty well detailed, and it would be if it was a stock dash. You can see here the diagram for the oil lines, and I also wrote down the length of those sections of tubing, and so we'll cut those all apart, and you could do them one at a time to make sure that you keep them straight. Now I jumped ahead a little bit here and installed the firewall, the radiator support assembly, and the battery into place. But it's actually probably better off if you follow the instructions and add the interior, because then you have a place to attach and route the oil lines. And when you get to those oil lines, the vinyl lines are about the same size as the bosses that they are being pinned onto. So you're going to need to enlarge those with a toothpick at the ends and leave it in there so that a little while, so that the pipes will expand, so to speak. And then you can route them faithfully as after you get the interior into place. So grab the oil filter unit, and it was painted semi-gloss black, and then it gets installed with the oil lines and attached to the passenger's side fender well. And here the final hose assembly is viewed from the top, and you can see all the hoses in place, and there's not much room for accessibility to mount those positions. So I also glued the coil, again with the homemade distributor, into place on the driver's side of the fender well. And I realized the wire boot wasn't in position, but that has been fixed, although you know, those things can be easy to overlook. So watch your model as you're building it and look for anything that you may have missed, or along the way it's easier to fix than when you're done. We'll attach the exhaust underneath to the engine exhaust pipes coming off the engine, and then along the frame there's some places to install that. And to keep them from getting knocked off during the build, I recommend you save installing the exhaust pipes until the last thing to be glued on, when the body is already on the chassis. They seem to be easy to catch. At this time I glued the seat fronts and backs together, and then glued the seat into place on the passenger side, and glued the door panels into place on both sides. This part shows the kit's gear shifter, and it was pretty fragile. It broke in half, so I had to replace it with one from my parts box, so be careful when handling that piece. And so now, with all the parts painted, as you can see here, most of them detailed with of course some semi-gloss or flat black for boots, and a little bit of silver or chrome for the chromed pieces. We can get ready to finish the interior. So go ahead and paint the two-part roll bar, and the rest of the interior parts cleaned up from flash and painted. We're going to just let those set for a while and work on the wheels. The wheel assemblies are pretty nice. They're pretty much true to that era, and just roll the tread on some 220 grit sandpaper on a flat surface to give it a little roughed up look and remove the center molding area. Stripe there, and then go ahead and glue the front and back pieces together. And you can see that I also painted the shafts and the side there with a little gunmetal to of course get rid of the chrome and make it look more realistic. Now the steering wheel and the column can be added. Glue those together and add them to the dashboard, and then that gets glued into the door panel mounts on the sides. And paint the fire extinguisher, install it to the floor on the passenger side. That's the red item there. Add the racing seat to the driver's side and put the roll bar into place, and glue the tires and wheels in place and set the chassis aside. to work on some of the body prep and assembly there. We now have a rolling chassis. So get out the main body parts there, and there was a little flash on them. Just a little trim and cleaning needed to be done at the sprue mounting points. So lightly sand the body with 800 grit paper, and then I sprayed them with a flat white primer. And then the interior, though, it showed some ejector pins after primer on the interior roof, so I filled those with putty and sanded them smooth and sprayed them again. Now the kit's window glass part will cover the roof marks, so there's no reason to really do anything to that unless you want to for your own peace of mind. So now we'll work on the spoiler here, and the instruction sheet mentions that you sand off the hatch key lock, sand that off before gluing the spoiler on, but it will also cover up the Datsun emblem there, so you can remove that too. Just use a sharp hobby knife and then sand it smooth and glue the spoiler into place. And with that done, move to the nose piece to do a test fit. And it was really good on the passenger side, but the driver's side needed a little sanding to make that fit flush. However, when I put the nose into place and looked from the inside of the body, I could see that the mounting tab was the real problem. So I removed a little bit of the tab at a time and test fit it until it fit just right. We'll work on the rear deck next, and the arrows indicate the positioning so that you get these part placement correct. Now I painted the outside of the clear rear tail lights with some clear red, and then the backup lights are just a mix of silver and white. You can see how they look on the after shot here. And after I did, after they were dried, I painted the inside silver to give it a little reflectivity. They're pretty easy to install using some clear cement, and tab 1 coincides to the number 1 mark on the rear piece of the body, and the other has 2 that go to the opening with 2 marks under it so that you can't get them wrong. So with the front and rear pieces glued in, we can tape the hood into position, and then we'll give it another coat of primer and then sand it lightly with some nice 1200 grit paper, and then I painted it with a gloss white. And then after the body dried a few hours, I taped off the lower section using some low-tack blue masking tape, and I sprayed the top with some Tester's bright red enamel, and the color match to the decals is really close. And then I removed the tape and allowed it to dry overnight. Next, I masked off the rear deck, which is a gloss black, and then I used a piece of cloth to cover up the rest of it, and you can see it's just sticking out here so that it wouldn't paint the rest, and I sprayed that gloss black with 2 light coats and then set it aside to dry. Next, I pulled the tape and applied all the decals to the body using some setting solution as it went along, and plenty of warm water to put them in position. They were pretty good, but they have to be handled, especially with some setting solution, to get them to conform to the contours. And then I decided to put a few coats of clear on it, overcoat, and I did 1 coat using some high gloss clear, and then I set it aside to dry. So after your body is thoroughly dried, I glued the window glass into place using some clear part cement, and then I put the body on the chassis and allowed it all to dry well before adding the final grille, the bumper, and the hood. Just place the chassis into position, spread the sides out a little bit, look for your glue mounting points, and then add your glue and place it back on and into position. And now once you've got that done, the grille, the bumper, and the hood can all go together, and the hood assembly consists of the hood with 2 mounts to be attached to it, and the grille has 2 mounts attached to attach it to the 2 arms there. And it's a nice feature to show off the engine compartment detail, although it's a little bit flimsy, but it does the job. And the bumper has 2 pins that slide into some mounting holes in the nose. So with the body, the hood, and everything completed, then you've finished up your model construction. Well, there you have it. This piece of model and racing car history looks great on the shelf, and even with its unusual white underpan. And the kit itself went together pretty well. No real issues. Just those oil lines, which they tend to be a problem because plastic pins are hard to get into scale. Just put that into position before the engine's installed so you've got room to work around in there. And if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf. Well, we hope you like this premium step-by-step model kit review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just click on the emblem at the lower right-hand corner. And you could also find us on Facebook and at our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks.